Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2006 documentary Jesus Camp. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review, and if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Jesus Camp is a documentary that was produced for a relatively low budget that was directed by Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady, and it's centered around this Christian camp called the Kids on Fire School of Ministry, which was a charismatic Christian summer camp that is thankfully no longer active, that was located just outside of Devil's Lake, North Dakota. And I did not make up any of that. It actually was called Kids on Fire, and it was located just outside of Devil's Lake, which I find ironic and incredibly fitting considering what was going on at that camp. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if this was also the location of a satanic cult, because of the fact that there were a lot of stuff going on at the time that you can consider to be the work of the devil. Psychological torture, manipulation, doing things to forcibly make kids cry. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you could look at as not being stuff that you would see associated with God, but associated with the other guy. I also find the title to be unbelievably messed up. I understand there's an explanation for it. I understand that it has a connection to the religion, but it's an unbelievably screwed up title. I'm sorry. I don't care what the connotation is. Kids on Fire is messed up. Like, if you called a summer camp for kids on fire in any other context, you would be asking for it. There would be all this controversy. No parent would ever want to send their kid to your camp. Like, can you imagine having a science camp called Science on Fire? Or Science Kids on Fire? You'd be like, what the hell is wrong with the people who are setting this camp up? I am not going to send my kid anywhere near that camp. But Kids on Fire, it's fine, because it's a ministry. And it's related to charismatic Christianity, which is an actual form of Christianity in the United States, and I think it also has some sects or some portions of it in other parts of the world. But charismatic, I think, is not the best way to put it. I understand why they're using charismatic, because it's a different sort of definition than what you normally think of when it comes to charismatic, just like it's a different sort of connotation when it comes to Kids on Fire. But to me, it should be called traumatic. And I know I'm not the only one that has made that notion or has connected the dots in that fashion. But from what I've seen in this documentary, yeah, charismatic my ass. Traumatic Christian summer camp. That's a better way to sum things up. The film is centered around these little talking points that are mentioned by the film's host, so to speak. A radio host and attorney named Mike Papantonio. And Mike Papantonio, he comes in and he talks about certain hot button issues from the time that sadly are still relevant today, which is depressing as hell. I mean, it's so damn depressing that a lot of the issues that he's talking about and this documentary talks about when it comes to society are still very prevalent now. I mean, this came out in 2006. And he, in a lot of ways, is the dissenting opinion. And in my opinion, the voice of reason among just absolute insanity. But that's just me. And I like the fact that he's there. It makes it so the documentary isn't just a one-sided affair. A lot of documentaries tend to do this where they don't have an opposing viewpoint. They don't have another person who has a differing opinion to throw into the mix, so it makes a documentary very dull. Because the documentary might initially have your interest, but then as it goes on, it just becomes something that doesn't have as much of a pull because there isn't a lot of variety when it comes to the viewpoints. Everything just starts to blend together. And I'm really glad that this documentary doesn't really have that issue. And before I go into talking about certain scenes in the documentary or certain people or certain ideologies, I want to briefly talk about the direction by Heidi and Rachel. The direction here is serviceable. It's okay. It's adequate. It's decent. It's not very noteworthy, though. The camera work is very standard. I think that was done intentionally, though. Just trying to be more like a guerrilla style kind of film, showcasing real events with real people in real time, inspired heavily by reality television and other documentaries from this time. But because of that approach, it does have a very static look to it. And visually, it's just kind of bland. There's really not a lot of flair. And I get that might have been the intention, but it makes the documentary visually just look like a whole lot of other documentaries from the time. It doesn't make the direction stand out from the rest of the pack. They also produced the film, and they're probably responsible for the overall structure of it. And I think it's a well-structured documentary. Like I said, I like the fact that it's structured around Mike and his different talking points about these really crazy movements in America and in Christianity who are doing some really controversial things with kids, and at the same time also trying to be the forefront of these really troubling ideas and ideologies, especially when it comes to how they connect with politics. Now, one of the main centerpieces of the film when it comes to its cast of characters is Becky Fisher, who is the woman who ran the Kids on Fire School of Ministry at the time. And I know this is not nice. I know this is a low blow, but I don't really care because this woman is an absolute psycho bitch. So I'm not going to sugarcoat things, and I'm just going to refer to her as batshit Becky from now on, because she's batshit insane. Like, this is a woman who is advocating for kids to be like jihads. She's wondering why kids in America, Christian kids in America, not all kids, just specifically Christian kids in America. She's wondering why Christian kids do not want to die for Jesus. They do not want to die for God. And they do not have the same commitment as other kids, other Muslim kids do in the Middle East. And I find that to be unbelievably screwed in the head. And that's why I'm like, yeah, batshit Becky. And that it doesn't stop there with this woman. I mean, she is the ringleader. She's the one that is responsible for the lessons that are being taught to these kids. She's the one that's responsible for the whole entire structure of this summer camp. She's the one that's responsible for activities, like these kids breaking mugs that say government on them. She's the one that's responsible for essentially teaching kids that it's okay to break the government. She's the one that's making it okay for kids to, in a lot of ways, militarize religion and their love for Christ and become warriors, which I find to be really demented. And she's also the one that says stuff like, hey, not enough people fast. Like, there's a lot of people who haven't fasted, and they need to fast. They need to show their commitment to God in that way. And I find it to be hilarious because it's like, bitch, like, if you've seen this documentary, if you see Becky Fisher, you see a picture of her, you see any footage of her, especially from this time period, this woman has not fasted a day in her entire life. I mean, you're talking about how people don't fast, and you look like you haven't passed up a meal at any point or at any time since you've been born, and you want to talk about fasting. Give me a fucking break. And the woman also has moments where she's talking about other just really just demented, crazy shit. And she's the one that's responsible for setting up these moments during the camp where these kids, after they've been exhausted with sermons or exhausted with playing with other kids or with all the other activities, she's the one that's responsible for essentially torturing these kids to the point where they cry. Because she and her colleagues have set up deliberately a series of psychological tortures where they take these kids and they play dissonant and uncomfortable music from boomboxes and loudspeakers, which is a proven psychological tactic to create a extreme emotional response. And they also have other people get on microphones and just make it even more uncomfortable by making weird, anachronistic, just strange noises. And this just causes the environment to be very uncomfortable and just emotionally charged. And it's done on purpose so these kids can have these breakthroughs and these awakenings. And to me, it's not a breakthrough, it's not an awakening. It's the kind of shit that you would see in a cult. And it's just disturbing. And it's psychological torture. It's the kind of stuff that you would see be done in an experiment to see what kind of reaction you would get from someone. But this time it's being done deliberately, and it's not in the name of science. It's being done deliberately to get these kids to have extreme emotions. And the emotion is usually like sadness and trauma and grief, and it's all supposedly done for God. And I'm like, I highly doubt if God was real, if Jesus Christ did exist, and he's really out there, that this is the kind of thing that he would advocate for. Or in God's case, it would advocate for. I don't buy that for 1 second. That Jesus, who's talking about how love everyone, that's a lot of Jesus's teachings. Love one another, respect one another, that kind of stuff. I don't think that he has a lot of teachings in the Bible where he's like, hey, psychologically torture the kids in the name of of me. In the name of Jesus, psychologically torture these kids. I mean, come on now. It's insane that never really came across these adults' minds, that what they are doing is wrong. And speaking of adults, you've got parents of these kids who were interviewed, and they look pretty nuts too. Where you have one mother of this kid named Levi who's talking about how science doesn't prove anything. Science doesn't prove anything? Like, what kind of fucking statement is that? And how dare you teach your kid that that's a mindset that's appropriate, let alone acceptable? You're having a kid who's growing up and becomes an adult with the mindset that science doesn't prove anything. Like, science doesn't prove anything? You know, there are other forms of science that don't just deal with evolution because they don't believe in evolution. They think that dinosaurs and humans lived together at one point in time when there is no actual evidence that ever occurred at any point in history. Like, there are actually some people, some Christians who are so kooky, they actually think that dinosaurs never even existed. But we have bones. We have bones. Fossils that prove that dinosaurs exist. But no, for some people, they don't even exist. They never even, they aren't real. Those fossils, those dinosaur bones, they aren't real. But anyway, science doesn't prove anything. You know, there are other forms of science like biology or architecture, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, where architectural science, chemistry, mathematics. Science doesn't prove anything. Science proves almost everything if you think about it. Like, science is what proves your body works the way that it does. Science is the thing that proves how a lot of other processes in the world or outside of our world work. Saying that science doesn't prove anything is one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my entire fucking life. And it's just really sad that there are parents that are teaching their kids this kind of bullshit. That science doesn't prove anything. And you feel for these kids because you know that they don't really ever grow up or become their own people unless they get away from a movement like this or this kind of environment. And I know there are some kids who grew up apparently and they're pastors now, or they're fine with their place in life, and that's fine, and I have no problem with that. I'm glad that they're happy. But you can't tell me that they actually were able to build their own viewpoint or their own idea of who they are and who they should be when their parents are just constantly just teaching them and manipulating them and force feeding them all these ideologies and all these ideas at an impressionable age. I'm sorry. That's what happens when you have a kid and you teach them these things and you constantly preach to them all this stuff and teach them what's acceptable, and you're always forcing them to have the same mindset as you, then they are never really able to find themselves. They're never really able to showcase who they are. They showcase who you are because that's who you want them to be. And this isn't just a religion sort of thing. This is going to tie into other aspects of people who are teaching their kids to act a certain way, or parents who want their kids to be doctors or athletes or so on. It's an issue. It's a problem that spans numerous different kinds of families, where you just have a lot of stuff where parents, for some reason or another, they just want their kids to be clones of them. They want their kids to be copies of them. They want their kids to be people who follow their ideologies, follow their religion, follow their beliefs, follow their interests, follow their passions. And that's just not at all something that I align with and I think is acceptable. Kids should have parents who let them grow into individuals, let them become who they want to be, and have the freedom to do that. And I don't think these kind of places, I don't think these kind of environments really lead to that kind of realization for kids. Because it's just not something that they're ever really able to have unless they break away from it. I mean, you even have this one kid who is featured in the documentary, and you feel so much for this kid because he's talking about how he's got doubts and he feels bad and he wants to believe, but he has questions. And you can just tell that the adults that are running this camp, you just tell by the look on their faces that they're just upset and mad at this kid, and like, how dare this kid have doubts about God and how about the Bible and so on. Like this kid is wrong, and I'm like, this kid is the only sane person in the room right now. Like, the kid has the right idea. I mean, this is the same place where they worship and pray over a cardboard cutout of George W. Bush. I'm not kidding. There's a whole scene where this old woman, brings in a cardboard cutout of George W. Bush. It's like, oh, hey kids, the president is here, and we want you to pray over him. The president is here. The level of delusion, it's just unbelievable. The president isn't actually there. It's a cardboard cutout. You probably bought at Party City or some shit. What the hell is wrong with you? And then you have other stuff where, like, there's this kid, this girl was like 8 or 10, named Rachel, who, you know, she wants to dance. She loves to dance. But she has this inner conflict where she feels like she can't just dance when she feels like it or when she wants to, because it's fun and she likes doing it, because she has to make sure that she doesn't dance for the flesh. That's not her speaking. That's her mom. That's her dad. That's this just manipulative Christian movement that's speaking through her. That's not actually her. I mean, what kind of kid is going to speak like that anyway? What kind of kid is naturally going to be like, I better make sure that I don't dance for the flesh and I only dance for God? Like, come on now. I mean, this is just messed up. Like, what the hell? Just let the poor girl dance. Stop putting this shit in her head that, oh, if she dances, she's too much. She's going to dance for the flesh and not for God. And you have stuff like Becky talking about how children need to purify themselves in order to become a part of the army of God. Children need to be in the forefront of turning America towards conservative Christian values. She's training her kids to be warriors. She's training her kids to be the ones that fix this world and make it better. But really, make it better is just make it the way that they want it to be. Make it in the vein, or mold it in the way that they want. It's all about control for Becky. It's a power trip. It's all about control for these parents. It's all about control when it comes to this movement, for the most part. There are a few people who aren't aligning with these extreme viewpoints, but there's a lot of them that are and still do. It's about control. It's about power. It's not about God, really. It's not about Jesus. It's not about the teachings of the Bible. It's about power and control. I mean, you have a whole scene where you have this guy named Ted Haggard, and he preaches about how homosexuality is a sin. And then, like 6 months after this documentary was released, he got busted. And he got busted with another man. So he was doing homosexual acts in secret with another man, and then on top of that, he got busted with meth. So he was doing drugs and doing guys. He was doing drugs and doing dudes. And he's preaching about how homosexuality is a sin. And I just thought that was pretty funny. Like, he's talking about all this stuff about homosexuality, and I was like, oh yeah, you definitely had a giant skeleton in your closet. That's for sure dead. And then you had another bit where they're talking about abortion and Roe versus Wade. You see, and that's really topical now, because look what's going on now with Roe versus Wade. You have kids who have like duct tape on their mouths that say like life. Oh, and then you have, of course, the moment when Becky talks about how Harry Potter would have been stoned to death because you can't read Harry Potter because it's evil. Harry Potter is the work of the devil because warlocks are satanic, and Harry Potter is a warlock, and warlocks would be stoned to death. Oh man, I mean, there's also another hilarious moment in the documentary when Becky Fisher and her crew like pray over every single thing at the camp. They pray over the pews, they pray over the computers, they pray over the PowerPoint presentation, they pray over every single thing. I'm like, man, you really overestimate how important your camp is to evil forces. Like, do you really think that Satan, if he is real and he actually is out there, that he's gonna give two flying shits about your podunk church camp? No. He probably doesn't give a shit. And in fact, he probably doesn't have to do anything either, because you're already doing enough work for him. Torturing these poor kids and making them cry. And the documentary has like a final moment, like finale, where Becky actually shows up on Mike's show, and she explains that she does not believe that people are able to choose their belief system once they pass childhood, so it's important that they be indoctrinated at a young age. And she explains that democracy is flawed because it's designed to destroy itself, because we have to give everyone equal freedom. So yeah, this bitch is not only insane, but she's also someone who legitimately wants people to not have equal freedom. She's against equal rights. Oh man. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm not gonna play around with pillow gloves or anything other than ironclad, hardcore, brass knuckles. I'm gonna tell it like it is. People like her are a problem in this society and in organized religion, and they give these religions a bad name and a black eye, and they're a big issue even to this day. This whole indoctrination attitude, this whole mindset, we got to indoctrinate our kids and make them think a certain way. That's manipulation. That's brainwashing. And I love how a lot of these same people are like, it's not brainwashing. It ticks off every single box of brainwashing. And you're going to tell me with a straight face that it's not brainwashing. Come on. Come on now. But they're so off the deep end. They're so corrupted with power and control that never comes to their mind. They never think for 1 second that it's not brainwashing. Or maybe they do think that and they don't care because they're like, it's a necessary evil. It's necessary. It must be done in order for this future of Christian values to come into play, in order for my views, my politics, my opinions, and my ideas of how the world should work to become the norm and to become the focus of political discourse in this country. It's a necessary thing. So to keep manipulating these kids, to keep psychologically torturing these children in these indoctrination camps, because it's something that must be done. And instead of looking at it, it's something that I want to be done. It's something that other people who are in power and have this control want to be done. So they still have this stranglehold and they still have this pull and this power over these kids and this power over this country, or at least some parts of this country, or power over certain political parties, certain parts of society. Instead of it looking at it as, I want this power and I want to continue to have this ability, they twist it into it being God's will. And it's God that wants this power. And it's God that wants this strength. And it's God that wants this control. And that's how they hook people. They trick them into thinking that it's God's will and it's what God wants and this is what Jesus would do. And for a lot of people in the United States and elsewhere, that's something you can't argue against. You can't argue against God's will. You can't argue against Jesus. God was real. God existed. If Jesus Christ was really out there and he really did care and he really did love humans and he loved people, then he wouldn't be doing this. This wouldn't be his plan. This wouldn't be what he would be all about. This would not be what Jesus would do, because Jesus really preached about how people should love one another. People should respect one another. Saying that people should not have equal rights in this country because they disagree with your politics and they disagree with your opinions, that's not at all what Jesus taught. And that's the thing that just frustrates me to no end when it comes to these extreme religious groups or sects, is that you have these people who just twist and manipulate not only other people, but the word of the Bible and the word of God and the word of Jesus, and they just twist things and they make it so people all across the world doubt the validity of the Bible even more, of the validity of Jesus and his teachings even more, or make them not want to buy into that because of their approach. People look at it and be like, well, if that's what Jesus would do, I don't want anything to do with the guy. And you can't blame people for thinking that way. And I know that not everyone who's a charismatic Christian, and I know that not everyone who's a Christian in this country, I know not everyone who's Republican or is a part of the right-wing party, I know that not all of them are like this. I know that not all of them buy into or believe these ideologies. But there still are a fair amount of people that do. And to me, those people are a problem in this country. They are a problem in Christianity. And they will continue to be a problem in politics and in religion, because they don't really see that they're doing anything wrong. And there are a lot of other people that also agree with them and feel the same way, that what they are doing is right. And it's justified. So, and then there are also people in the Democratic Party, people who are on the left that are religious or political, that have equally as problematic and troubling viewpoints. I'm only mentioning the right, and I'm only mentioning Republicans, I'm only mentioning Christians because that's the focus of this documentary. If this was a documentary that was talking about people on the left, and talking about a certain other religion or a certain other subsect of Christianity, then I would have the same viewpoint, because I am not the kind of person who aligns themselves with any political party. So all of them are fair game to me. And I'm not a particularly religious person either, so all of the religions are fair game to me too, when it comes to these kind of viewpoints and these kind of opinions from yours truly. But anyway, I don't have anything else to say. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.